What if the biggest question about war isn't who fired the first shot? What if the bigger question is who shaped the story that made war seem inevitable? Because before wars are fought on battlefields, they're fought through information, through narratives, through fear, through competing versions of reality. And throughout modern history, one pattern appears again and again. Long before soldiers move, long before Congress votes, long before taxpayers pay the bill, someone is trying to shape how the public understands what's happening. Sometimes those narratives are accurate, but sometimes they aren't. Sometimes leaders face real threats. Sometimes intelligence gets it wrong. But history shows that before nearly every major conflict, there is a battle over perception. And whoever wins that battle often influences everything that follows. Today, we're following that pattern across more than a century of history, from World War I to Cold War covert operations to Vietnam to Iraq, and into today's conflicts involving Israel, Gaza, and Iran. Not to prove every war is manufactured, not to claim every government is lying, but to ask a question every citizen should ask. How do we know when we're seeing reality and when we're seeing a version of reality shaped by someone else's interests?
I'm exiled to the greener grass, searching for the uncertain haze.
Welcome to Choms Talks. I'm Choms. This is a place where facts meet opinions. Because facts matter. Facts tell us what happened. Facts help separate evidence from rumor. Facts help us understand how decisions made by powerful institutions affect ordinary people. The facts alone don't tell us what to think. That's where opinions come in. Governments have opinions. Political leaders, media organizations, and experts have opinions. So do ordinary Americans. Here, we separate the two. We'll examine facts first, then we'll discuss what those facts might mean. You don't have to agree with my conclusions. In fact, you shouldn't accept anyone's conclusions without questioning them. But curiosity is more valuable than certainty. And when it comes to war, asking questions matters, because the people who ultimately pay the price are rarely the people making the decisions. They're the taxpayers, the workers, the soldiers, the families, the ordinary citizens who live with the consequences long after the headlines disappear, and that's where our story begins. In the summer of 1914, Europe looked unstoppable. Trade was booming. Technology was advancing. Financial markets were thriving. The world's major powers were deeply connected through commerce, banking, and diplomacy. Many believed a large-scale war between industrial nations had become impossible. Then, one assassination changed everything. Archduke Franz Ferdinand. One gunshot, one city, one moment. And within weeks, Europe was marching towards catastrophe. Here's the lesson most people miss. Nobody thought they were starting a world war. Austria-Hungary believed it was defending itself. Serbia believed it was protecting its sovereignty. Russia believed it was protecting Serbia. Germany believed it was protecting Austria. France believed it was honoring alliances. Britain believed it was defending Belgium. Everyone believed they were reacting. Few believed they were escalating. Yet, more than 16 million people would die. Entire empires would disappear, and the world would never be the same. World War I wasn't caused by a single decision. It was caused by a series of decisions that nobody stopped in time. And that raises an uncomfortable question. If everybody believes they're acting defensively, how does anyone recognize when escalation has become unstoppable? Because that question didn't disappear in 1914. In many ways, it became the defining question of the modern world. The Second World War changed everything. By 1945, the United States emerged as the world's dominant economic power. But victory created a new challenge: Soviet Union. Two superpowers, two competing systems, one planet. And suddenly, information became just as important as military strength. Because in the Cold War, influence mattered, perception mattered, narratives mattered. Winning hearts and minds mattered. This period gave rise to an intelligence apparatus unlike anything the world has ever seen. Organizations tasked not only with collecting information, but shaping events, sometimes openly, sometimes secretly. One of the most significant examples occurred in Iran. The year was 1953. Iran's elected Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh had nationalized portions of the country's oil industry. From the perspective of many Iranians, it was an issue of sovereignty. From the perspective of Western powers, it threatened strategic and economic interests. Cold War fears intensified the situation. American and British intelligence agencies became involved in efforts that ultimately contributed to Mossadegh's removal. The operation succeeded. A friendly government remained in place. For policymakers at the time, it was viewed as a strategic victory. But history rarely ends where policymakers think it will, because actions create consequences. The Iranian monarchy would remain in power for decades. Resentment would build. Political opposition would grow. Eventually, the Iranian Revolution would arrive in 1979, and many of the tensions shaping today's Middle East can trace part of their origins back to decisions made decades earlier. This is one of the most important patterns in modern history. Short-term victories often create long-term consequences. The people making decisions may be gone, the administrations may change, the headlines disappear, but consequences remain for generations. Just 1 year later, a similar story unfolded in Guatemala. Again, Cold War fears dominated policymaking, and again, leaders worried about communist influence. Again, intelligence operations helped shape political outcomes. The intervention succeeded in achieving immediate objectives, but the aftermath proved far more complicated. Political instability expanded, violence intensified, decades of conflict followed, and once again, ordinary people paid the highest price. This theme repeats constantly throughout history. Decision makers often focus on immediate goals, but citizens are the ones who have to live with the long-term results. If there's one conflict that fundamentally changed how Americans think about government narratives, it's Vietnam. Vietnam wasn't just a military conflict. It became an information conflict, an intelligence conflict, a political conflict, and eventually a crisis of public trust. At first, many Americans believed victory would come quickly. Officials repeatedly assured the public that progress was being made. Metrics looked encouraging. Reports sounded optimistic. Briefings projected confidence. Yet, reality on the ground often appeared far more complicated. As the war expanded, a gap began emerging between official narratives and public perceptions. Television brought battlefield images directly into American living rooms. Citizens could see the war, not just hear about it. The more they saw, the more questions they asked. One of the most controversial programs associated with the conflict was the Phoenix Program. Reporters argued it was designed to identify and dismantle insurgent infrastructure. Critics argued it became associated with abuses, mistaken targeting, and significant ethical concerns. Decades later, historians still debate aspects of its effectiveness and the consequences. But regardless of where one stands politically, the broader lesson remains. Intelligence operations often exist in morally gray areas. Governments face real threats, but the tools used to address those threats can create entirely new controversies. Vietnam also revealed something else. Public trust is fragile. Once citizens believe information is being withheld or manipulated or selectively presented, confidence becomes difficult to restore. And that lesson would have enormous consequences in the decades ahead. Because Vietnam created a generation of Americans who became skeptical of the official narrative, sometimes for good reason, sometimes to the point of excessive cynicism. Either way, trust had changed. And once trust changes, politics changes. Whenever people discuss Vietnam, conversations usually focus on geopolitics, strategy, military decisions, Cold War ideology. But for ordinary Americans, the cost was personal. More than 58,000 Americans died. Hundreds of thousands returned home carrying physical and psychological scars. Families were divided. Communities were changed. Tax dollars flowed into a conflict that lasted far longer than many expected. And while historians continue debating whether the war could have been won or whether it should have been fought differently, one reality remains undisputed. The people making decisions rarely experienced the war the same way ordinary citizens did. The average American bore that burden. The average American paid the cost. And that pattern will become increasingly important as we continue through the story. Because the next chapter isn't about soldiers fighting in jungles. It's about something far less visible: covert power, influence, and the growing belief that the most important battles often happen before the public even realizes they're taking place. By the 1970s, the Cold War had transferred how superpowers competed. The United States and the Soviet Union rarely fought each other directly. Instead, they competed through influence, through allies, through proxy conflicts, through intelligence operations, and increasingly through efforts to shape political outcomes inside other nations. To understand how modern conflicts are influenced, we have to understand this period, because many of the tools used today are refined during these decades. The battlefield wasn't always a battlefield. Sometimes it was an election, sometimes a newspaper, a labor strike, a student movement, a rumor, sometimes a piece of intelligence, and sometimes a story that became accepted as fact before anyone had the opportunity to verify it. In 1970, Chile elected Salvador Allende. Allende was a socialist. His election alarmed many policymakers in Washington. At the height of the Cold War, leaders feared that another nation in the Western Hemisphere could move closer to Soviet influence. The concern was strategic. It was ideological and geopolitical. American policymakers worried about what they called a domino effect. If one country shifted towards Soviet alignment, would others follow? Those fears drove covert efforts aimed at influencing outcomes in Chile. Economic pressure increased, political pressure increased, intelligence operations expanded. Eventually, Chile's government was overthrown in 1973. General Augusto Pinochet assumed power. Supporters of American Cold War policy often argue these actions were necessary to prevent Soviet expansion. Critics argue the intervention undermined democracy while contributing to human rights abuses. That debate continues today. Again, regardless of where one stands politically, Chile demonstrates a recurring pattern. Powerful nations rarely view foreign events as isolated. They view them through strategic interests. And once strategic interests become involved, information becomes a weapon. Narratives become weapons. Perception becomes a weapon. Another example emerged in Indonesia. During the 1960s, Indonesia occupied a critical strategic position. It sat along major trade routes. It possessed significant resources, and it was viewed as one of the most important countries in Southeast Asia. But political instability created opportunities for competing factions. As tensions escalate, violence exploded. Hundreds of thousands died. Some estimates place the death toll significantly higher. Even today, historians continue debating precise numbers and responsibilities. But one fact remains clear. The Cold War transformed local political conflicts into global strategic contests. And when major powers viewed a country as strategically important, local populations often paid the price. This is another lesson history repeatedly teaches. Ordinary people rarely get to decide whether their country becomes strategically important, but they often experience the consequences when it does. One of the most difficult realities about covert operations is that success can be measured differently depending on who's doing the measuring. An intelligence operation might achieve its immediate objective. A government might remain friendly, a rival power might lose influence, and a strategic concern might disappear. On paper, that can look like success, but decades later, historians may see something different. Political instability, public resentment, regional conflict, blowback, consequences that nobody anticipated, or consequences that were accepted because leaders believed the alternative was worse. History rarely offers simple villains and heroes. Instead, it often presents difficult choices with imperfect outcomes. And nowhere was that more apparent than the 1980s. Iran-Contra affair is one of the most controversial U.S. political scandals ever. In 1986, Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North was accused of orchestrating the illegal sale of $30 million worth of weapons to Iran and using those profits. U.S. hostages had been taken in Lebanon by a militant group with ties to Iran and Hezbollah. President Ronald Reagan wanted their release, and the White House secretly sanctioned the sale of weapons to Iran, sending North, the National Security Council advisor on terrorism, to negotiate. The whole operation unraveled when a U.S. plane carrying supplies to the Contras was shot down over Nicaragua. By the 1980s, Americans were already becoming skeptical of official narratives. Then came one of the most controversial political scandals of the Cold War, Iran-Contra. The story sounds almost unbelievable. Privately, elements within the government pursued another. Weapons were secretly sold to Iran. Some of the proceeds were diverted to support anti-communist forces in Nicaragua, known as the Contras. The operation bypassed restrictions that Congress had imposed. When the story became public, it exploded into one of the biggest scandals of the decade. Congressional investigations followed. Televised hearings dominated headlines. Questions emerged about accountability, transparency, oversight, and executive power. For many Americans, Iran-Contra reinforced a growing concern. how much of foreign policy happens outside public view, how much information reaches citizens, and how much remains hidden until years later. The scandal didn't convince everyone that government institutions were dishonest, but it did convince many Americans that important decisions could occur far from public scrutiny. And once again, trust took another hit. Trust is one of the most valuable resources any government possesses. Without trust, citizens become suspicious. Information is questioned, conspiracy theories flourish, even truthful statements face resistance. And this would become increasingly important after the Cold War ended, because many Americans expected a peace dividend. The Soviet Union collapsed. The Cold War was over. The primary geopolitical rival had disappeared. Many Americans assumed military spending would decline. International tensions would ease. The world would become safer. Instead, history had other plans. The Cold War ended, but conflict didn't. In some ways, it accelerated. The old framework disappeared. A new framework had not yet emerged. And that created uncertainty. Into that uncertainty came a new crisis: Iraq, Kuwait, and the first Gulf War. In 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait. The invasion shocked the world. This was not a covert conflict. This was not a gray area intelligence operation. This was a conventional military invasion. The international response was swift. A large coalition formed, military force was authorized, and Operation Desert Storm began. The coalition achieved its objective quickly. American military capabilities stunned observers around the world. The war demonstrated overwhelmingly technological superiority. Many viewed it as a textbook military success, but something else happened. Television coverage transformed public understanding of warfare. Precision-guided munitions, smart bombs, night vision footage, wars increasingly appeared cleaner than they actually were. The brutality remained, the destruction remained, human cost remained, but technology changed perception. And perception matters because public support often depends on perception. After the Gulf War, many Americans expected military involvement abroad to decrease. Yet, over the next decade, interventions continued. Somalia, Bosnia, Kosovo. No single conflict dominated public attention, but together they demonstrated something important. The United States had become the world's sole superpower. And with that power came expectations. Some argued America had a responsibility to intervene. Others argued intervention created endless commitments. The debate continues today. But by the end of the 1990s, another challenge was already emerging. One that would change everything. September 11th, 2001. Nearly every American remembers where they were. I know I do. The attacks killed thousands. The shock was immediate. The fear was real. The anger was real. The desire for action was overwhelming. For a brief moment, political divisions largely disappeared. The country united around a common purpose: prevent another attack at almost any cost. This is where understanding history becomes difficult. Because fear changes decision-making. Fear changes politics. Fear changes what populations are willing to accept. And leaders operating under pressure often make decisions that would have been unimaginable during normal circumstances. The United States entered Afghanistan. Public support was overwhelming. Most Americans viewed military action as justified. The Taliban government had provided sanctuary to al-Qaeda. The objective appeared straightforward: destroy the terrorist network responsible. Yet, what began as a focused operation gradually expanded into something much larger: nation building, counterinsurgency, long-term occupation, and eventually America's longest war, only for the Taliban to regain control again years later. At first, the financial costs seemed manageable, the human costs seemed manageable, timeline seemed manageable, but wars rarely remain frozen in time. They evolve, objectives change, new threats emerge, commitments expand, and before long, Americans found themselves engaged in conflicts that would last decades rather than months. Meanwhile, another debate was beginning, one that would become one of the most consequential intelligence controversies in modern history: the debate about Iraq, weapons of mass destruction, and the challenge of making decisions under uncertainty. By late 2022, the United States was still processing the trauma of September 11th. The fear remained fresh, the anger remained fresh, the desire to prevent another attack remained strong. And it was in that environment the tension shifted toward Iraq. The argument presented to the American public was straightforward. Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction. Those weapons represented a threat, and waiting could be dangerous. Government officials, intelligence assessments, foreign allies, media organizations, and political leaders debated the evidence. Some believed the threat was real. Others expressed skepticism. But in March of 2003, the invasion began. At first, events appeared to support the decision. American forces rapidly defeated Saddam Hussein's government. Baghdad fell. The regime collapsed. Many believed the conflict would end quickly. But then came the question that would reshape public trust for a generation. Where were the weapons? Months passed, then more months, then years. And the stockpiles that many expected to find never appeared. Investigations followed, reviews followed, reports followed, and eventually a painful reality emerged. The intelligence had been wrong. Not necessarily fabricated, not necessarily invented, but wrong. And that distinction matters because history often becomes distorted when people oversimplify. Many Americans came to believe they had been deliberately lied to. Others argued policymakers acted on flawed intelligence they genuinely believed. Historians still debate elements of that question today. But regardless of the intent, the outcome was devastating for public trust. Because citizens don't experience policy through classified reports, they experience it through results. And the result was a war that lasted years. Thousands of American deaths, hundreds of thousands of Iraqi deaths, trillions of dollars in costs, regional instability, and the collapse of confidence in many institutions that had supported the war. For millions of Americans, Iraq became the defining lesson of modern foreign policy. Not because mistakes were made, mistakes happen, but because the consequences were so enormous. Iraq revealed something important about intelligence. Intelligence is not magic. It is not certainty. It is not prophecy. It is an attempt to understand incomplete information. Sometimes intelligence is accurate, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes leaders receive conflicting assessments. Sometimes analysts disagree. Sometimes political pressure influences interpretation. Sometimes fear influences interpretation. And when the stakes involve war, the margin for error becomes extraordinarily small. The Iraq experience created a generation of Americans who became deeply skeptical whenever governments claimed a new threat required immediate action. Understandably so. That skepticism would shape every major foreign policy debate that followed. If Iraq damaged trust, the internet transformed what happened next. For most of the 20th century, information moved relatively slowly. Newspapers, television, radio. Large institutions controlled most communication, but by the 2010s, everything changed. Information became decentralized. Anyone could publish, anyone could broadcast, anyone could influence millions of people. At first, many viewed this as a triumph. More voices, more perspectives, more transparency, more accountability. And those benefits were real. But new problems emerged. Information overload, disinformation, misinformation, algorithmic amplification, and confirmation bias. People gained access to more information than ever before, yet many felt less certain about what was true. This created a whole new battlefield, not a physical battlefield, a digital battlefield, a battle for attention, for perception, and for belief. Today, governments compete on that battlefield. Media organizations compete on that battlefield. So do activists, foreign intelligence services, political campaigns, corporations, and ordinary citizens are caught in the middle. The challenge isn't finding information. The challenge is determining which information deserves trust. The intervention in Libya became another example of how difficult modern conflicts can be. Supporters argued intervention was necessary to prevent a humanitarian disaster. Critics warned that removing a government without a stable replacement would create chaos. The intervention succeeded in removing Gaddafi, but the years that followed proved turbulent. Factional violence expanded, political instability continued, and once again, a familiar question emerged. How should success be measured? The immediate objective or the long-term outcome? History often struggles to answer that question. Syria presented an even more complicated picture. Multiple factions, regional powers, global powers, terrorist organizations, competing intelligence assessments, competing narratives, competing objectives. The conflict demonstrated how difficult it has become to identify a single clear storyline. Different actors often viewed the same events through entirely different lenses, and millions of people trying to understand the conflict were left attempting to navigate a maze of competing claims. This increasingly defines modern geopolitics, not a lack of information, it's an excess of information. Which brings us to today, Iran. For decades, Iran has remained one of the most contentious issues in international politics. The disagreements are real. The stakes are real. The security concerns are real. But so are the disagreements about how those concerns should be interpreted. Some policymakers view Iran as an urgent threat requiring aggressive containment. Others argue that escalation itself creates greater risks. Some intelligence assessments emphasize one set of concerns, other assessments emphasize different factors. And this is where understanding history becomes essential, because history teaches us something important. Intelligence assessments are not always unanimous. Governments do not always disagree. Allies do not always agree. Experts don't always agree. And citizens should expect disagreement when confronting complex security challenges. Recent public debates have highlighted the differences. Some political leaders and foreign governments have argued that Iran's capabilities represent an immediate danger. Others have pointed to intelligence assessments suggesting a more nuanced picture. The disagreement itself is not unusual. In fact, it may be one of the most normal features of national security decision-making. What matters is how those disagreements are presented to the public. Are citizens hearing multiple perspectives? Are uncertainties acknowledged? Are assumptions challenged? Are dissenting viewpoints considered? Because once a nation commits itself to a major conflict, reversing course becomes extremely difficult. History shows that repeatedly. At this point, some viewers may be asking, so what's the lesson? What's the hidden pattern? Is the pattern that every war is manufactured? No. History does not support that conclusion. Many threats are real. Many enemies are real. Many conflicts are unavoidable. The hidden pattern is something different. The hidden pattern is that before every major conflict, there is almost always a struggle over information, a struggle over narratives, a struggle over perception, a struggle over how events are interpreted. Sometimes governments get it right. Sometimes they get it wrong. Sometimes intelligence proves accurate, but sometimes it fails. Sometimes warnings prevent disaster. Sometimes the warnings create unnecessary escalation. The challenge for citizens is learning how to think critically without becoming cynical, to ask questions without assuming every answer is a lie, to remain informed without becoming consumed by fear. Because fear is powerful. Fear can unite societies. Fear can motivate action, but fear can also reduce scrutiny. And scrutiny is essential in a democracy. Throughout this episode, we've discussed presidents, generals, intelligence agencies, governments, foreign leaders, geopolitical strategies. But at the end of the day, history is not lived by institutions. It's lived by people. The worker trying to pay bills, the small business owner, the taxpayer, the military family, the young soldier, the parent watching the news, the citizen trying to understand what is happening. These are the people who ultimately carry the burden. They fund the policies. They endure the consequences. They absorb the economic shocks. They experience the social divisions. And they live with the long-term results long after the headlines disappear. And that may be the most important lesson of all. Wars are often discussed as strategic calculations, but they are experienced as human realities. A century ago, Europe stumbled into World War I, believing events were under control. They weren't. Decades later, intelligence agencies reshaped governments across the globe, sometimes achieving objectives, sometimes creating consequences that lasted generations. Vietnam exposed the limits of official narratives. Iran-Contra exposed the limits of public oversight. Iraq exposed the limits of intelligence. The digital age exposed the limits of information itself. And now we live in a world where every crisis arrives accompanied by millions of competing interpretations. Perhaps that's the real challenge of the 21st century. Not simply avoiding war, but understanding how wars become possible. Understanding how narratives are built. Understanding how fear spreads. Understanding how power operates. And understanding that every citizen has a responsibility to ask questions before history makes decisions for them. Because democracy cannot function without informed citizens. And informed citizens cannot exist without curiosity. The goal is not blind skepticism. The goal is informed judgment. To examine evidence, to question assumptions, to remain open to new information, and to remember that the cost of getting these decisions wrong is almost always paid by ordinary people. History has taught us that lesson many times. The question is whether we are willing to learn it. So what's my opinion? When I look at history, I see a pattern. Conflicts are often shaped by narratives designed to build support for action. Information is selective. Fear plays a role, and alliances expand participation. Because of that, I believe many conflicts appear manufactured in the sense that they are constructed through framing, persuasion, the escalation dynamics, not necessarily invented, but shaped into larger events than they might otherwise have become. And by the time the truth becomes clear, cost has already been paid. I'm Chomps. This is Chomps Talks. And the question isn't just about what happened in history. It's how we were convinced it was necessary. Thank you. Bye.